Fights and clashes are a common occurrence in sporting events, with incidents involving headbutts or biting in football, or even outright punches during basketball games. Formula 1 is no exception to such conflicts, and has its fair share of altercations that could probably make its way into theatres. The FIA has always maintained a strict policy on both drivers and teams for actions that might endanger the lives of others, considering that the risks involved in motor racing are far greater than any other sport. Although these drivers battle it out on track on race weekends, there have been times when these rivalries have spilled onto the paddock and even turned physical. So without wasting any more time, let's have a look at some of the times F1 drivers went too far. Ayrton Senna versus Eddie Irvine. Our first entry on this list is a rather infamous scuffle that took place at the 1993 Japanese GP. A young Irvine looked forward to starting off his F1 campaign with Jordan after his stint in Formula 3000. Despite his lack of experience in F1, Eddie managed to finish 6th overall that weekend in a spectacular drive. However, Ayrton Senna did not feel the same way about Irvine's race performance. The Brazilian driver who was leading the race was furious at being overtaken by the rookie. Although Senna did end up winning the race with a comfortable margin, his frustration towards Irvine only kept growing. Senna angrily made his way to the Jordan garage and began berating Irvine for his move on track as things started to get tense between the two. In a fit of rage, Senna pounced on Irvine, throwing a punch at the unsuspecting driver, and was promptly stopped from doing anything further by his McLaren team. This incident would not go too well for Ayrton, who was awarded a 2-race suspended ban for attacking a fellow driver as per the FIA's decision. Irvine, on the other hand, would go unscathed and have an interesting start to his F1 ambitions. James Hunt versus safety marshals. Star of the 2013 racing film Rush, James Hunt always had a bad boy reputation throughout his years in F1. Even though he is widely recognised for his fierce rivalry with Niki Lauda, Hunt did not get into trouble with another driver, but instead with a safety marshal who had stepped in to help Hunt in the first place. At the 1977 Canadian Grand Prix, Hunt was trailing behind his teammate Jochen Mass and Mario Andretti of the Lotus team. Hunt eventually managed to get the better of Andretti and moved ahead now only behind his teammate. Unfortunately, the two front runners would collide, much to Hunt's frustration. While Mass suffered minor damage to his car finishing 3rd, Hunt had to retire from that race, which he was not quite happy about. As safety marshal Ernie Strong went to help the stranded driver, he received a fistful of Hunt's fury for no fault of his own. James Hunt would later be fined $2,000 and was also sued by the marshal, who described the episode saying, "How did I feel? Wronged, blindsided. Did that really happen? If I said anything to him, I can't remember. He gave me a sorry, old man, and headed back to the pits." Max Verstappen versus Esteban Ocon. The youngest driver to ever participate in Formula 1, Max Verstappen quickly rose through the ranks at Red Bull and has become a dependable race winner. He nonetheless missed out on an opportunity to win a Grand Prix in Brazil 2018. Verstappen was leading the race at Interlagos and had already passed backmarker Esteban Ocon. However, Ocon soon caught up with Max and tried to unlap himself, which is when the two touched wheels and spun across the track. This simple detour cost Verstappen the win as Hamilton sealed the deal. As expected, Verstappen was outraged at Ocon's mistake and went to confront the French driver at the Weybridge garage during a mandated weight check. The Red Bull driver launched himself towards Ocon, aggressively pushing and hitting the Racing Point driver several times in the chest. Even though the FIA were sympathetic with Max's loss in the race and had awarded Ocon a 10-second penalty, this incident clearly did not help Verstappen's case, as he would later be asked to perform public service for his actions. The FIA later issued a statement in which they felt strongly for Max but disapproved of his unprofessional behaviour as a sportsman. Michael Schumacher versus David Coulthard. During the 1998 season, Michael Schumacher was in a tight battle against Mika Häkkinen for that year's championship. The championship fight took an interesting turn at the Belgian GP, beginning with a massive pile-up in the first lap itself caused by David Coulthard on a rain-soaked track. At the subsequent restart, Häkkinen crashed out, thus opening up Schumacher's chances of seizing the lead in the driver's standings. In a brilliant drive, Schumacher had already put himself ahead of other drivers with a 40-second lead, but his race would soon go sideways as he tried to overtake Coulthard. Initially, the McLaren driver neglected to make way for Schumacher, but later changed his mind. However, in the confusion, Coulthard drastically slowed down, and Schumacher, who was behind him, was blinded by the spray, crashing into Coulthard. To no surprise, Schumacher was livid with rage at being denied an easy win and stormed towards the McLaren garage, having allegedly shouted, "Are you trying to kill me?" at Coulthard. Michael's inability to score points that weekend and issues with his car in the remaining races allowed Häkkinen to claim the title in 1998. Nigel Mansell versus Ayrton Senna. Now, Senna has had a history of being involved in fights outside the track, but for once he was not the one to initiate it. Nigel Mansell, who qualified on pole at the Belgian GP in 1987, was all set to take advantage of his position, except for the fact that Senna had a much better exit in the second of the two starts in that race. Mansell was unwilling to let Senna take over the lead as the two drivers entered the next corner. With neither car backing out, the two crashed into each other and were pushed onto the gravel. Senna's race ended immediately, while Mansell continued to race until lap 17 when he was forced to retire due to severe damage to his vehicle. Soon after, Mansell walked towards the Lotus garage on the paddock and in a heated moment pushed Senna against the wall, grabbing the Brazilian driver by the overalls. He wore loose overalls in those days, and I pulled the zip up beyond his chin to just below his nose. "Next time you do that," I said, "you're going to have to do a much better job," recalled Mansell about the incident later on. Adrian Sutil versus Jarno Trulli. Unlike the other entries on this list, these two drivers did not end up in a physical fight, but came quite close to blows after the 2009 Brazilian GP. Trulli, who was driving the Toyota at the time, tried to make a move around Force India's Adrian Sutil, which resulted in both cars spinning out of the track into the barriers. Sutil lost control of his car and ended up collecting Fernando Alonso as well in the bargain. Jarno Trulli, though, was quite miffed about the incident and started a war of words with Sutil on the track side. Their arguments would continue during the subsequent press conferences, with Sutil blaming Trulli for the accident while Trulli thought otherwise. The two would exchange plenty of words in front of the media, defending their stance throughout the whole ordeal. Trulli even managed to get pictures of the incident to prove himself right, whereas Sutil brought up past instances of the two crashing into each other. Despite all of the drama that took place, the incident was dismissed as a racing incident, and Jarno Trulli had to shell out a $6,000 fine for disobeying an official in the aftermath of his crash. Nelson Pique versus Eliseo Salazar. In one of the more action-heavy fights in this list, Nelson Pique displayed his actual fighting skills for the first time in F1 at the Hockenheim Ring in 1982. The defending world champion had qualified in 4th position for the race and was all set to add another race win to his list of accomplishments. Pique's hopes would be dashed quite literally by Eliseo Salazar, who was struggling with his brakes and slammed into the Brabham. Salazar, the only driver from Chile in F1, was lagging behind and had just been overtaken by Pique, who was leading the race at the point. The Brazilian driver was obviously boiling with anger and let out his rage on Salazar, which broke into an outright kickboxing match to the delight of the spectators. It was later revealed that Pique was already suffering from mechanical issues with his car and would have retired nevertheless even if Salazar had never crashed into him. The mild-mannered Salazar did not put up a fight against Pique, and the two were separated only after some intervention from the stewards present during the incident. Over the years, things have changed considerably in F1, as drivers have become more responsible with their actions while taking into account the PR damage that such incidents could lead to. As social media has made the sport more accessible to fans, any unfavourable action could mean the end to a driver's career, which is why they're more restrained and thoughtful these days. What are your thoughts about some of these fights amongst the drivers? Tell us in the comments and let us know what you would like for us to cover next. Until then, like, share and subscribe to Pit Stop.